I would say, to begin with, at least, don't worry about making mistakes. Never be fearful of making mistakes, because essentially you can't make mistakes. When you're at the beginning of your career, when you're young, you shouldn't be able to do anything which is serious enough to really mess anything up. So that is the time when you have to learn.
Hey guys, this is Manish here, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Archgyan podcast, where you will get some awesome gyan on architecture, tech, design, BIM, and a whole lot more. So today I'm super stoked to have with us Simon Gallagher, who is one of the directors at Integrated Design Limited, which is a BIM consultancy firm based in Hong Kong with offices in Singapore as well as Calcutta. So they provide BIM consultancy services to owners, designers, and contractors throughout Asia, and their services include building information modeling, building information management, virtual design and construction, BIM modeling, laser scanning, digital twins, which we're going to be talking about in this episode, rendering and animation, and a whole lot more. So Simon heads most of the BIM work and oversees most of the projects at Integrated Design. He's been part of the AECO industry for more than 20 years, and he's worked at various multinational engineering and design companies under various job titles related to BIM. He's a huge advocate for BIM and everything BIM related, and it can be seen in his various accolades that he's received over the years. He's a Chartered Architectural Technologist, also known as MCIAT, since September 2012. He's a professional member of the Hong Kong Institute of BIM, and he's also a CIC Certified BIM Manager. So apart from BIM, he's a doting father of 2 daughters and enjoys spending time with them. And he's been settled in Hong Kong for more than 7 years now. So in this episode, Simon talks about his entire journey in the world of BIM, working at various international firms around the world, the process of a typical BIM project, BIM in Hong Kong and of course Asia, the future of construction, and a whole lot more in this episode. This podcast is sponsored by courses.archgyan.com, a platform for you guys to learn more about architecture, design, and get yourself geared up for the future. So you'll find the show notes and links at archgyan.com/52, or you'll also find it in the description below. Now, let's jump straight to the episode. All right. So before we get into the technicalities or BIM in general, give us a brief about yourself and how you got started and how you got into this space, and also what exactly it is that you do.
Okay, so this may turn out to be a bit of a story, but I'll try and keep it brief.
Yeah, sure.
Basically, the best thing probably I ever achieved was I got into Chelsea College of Art
Nice.
when I left school. So I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to do something vaguely creative, that I enjoy architecture and design, but I really didn't know, and it was a kind of traditional style Bauhaus type setup in terms of the way that the course was run, which meant that you went off and you kind of did a bit of everything. So you did 3D design, you did illustration, all sorts of stuff, with different tutors, and then you would pick something in, I think, your second or anyway, one of the semesters you had to pick, and then you kind of focused, and then that was what you ended up doing. So I ended up doing interior design.
Right.
That was basically how I got into interior design, and then I did a degree in interior design
Oh,
at
awesome.
Bournemouth University. So I'm not an architect, and I never went through architectural studies courses in the traditional route at all. And from there, my first job after graduating was working for an actual manufacturer of timber trusses and value-added timber called Donaldson Timber Engineering. So it's a Scottish company. And I worked at they had a UK design centre, which was a very small office, but it basically covered all the tricky stuff that the rest of the factories couldn't handle.
Right.
So they had a sort of very, it was essentially straight to manufacture.
Right.
So kind of very early DFMA, I suppose you could call it, what they call DFMA now. So you'd have a request for, this is the span, this is the pitch, this is so you'd work out the truss design using this software, MyTech software. So MyTech make the truss clips, So truss plates are basically, they're like gang nails that hold the timber together. So they cut some timber, they basically press it together with these gang nails, and then ideally they stick them on the back of a truck and it goes to site and they crane them into place, and then that's your roof. So this is an old it's an old industry. It's been going around. You know, they've been building timber trusses in the UK this way since the 60s, maybe even earlier. It's not new, but the way they do it is very, because it's straight. They're interested in selling wood, basically, and they get the markup on all of the other services you get with it. So one of the things they can offer is a design service, and that's why I was working for the design office, because they would get someone comes in with a tricky roof that's round or a funny shape or something, and they need help with setting it out, and we could figure that out for them using trigonometry. So using some maths, but it's not crazy over the top stuff, but we were using some maths and some geometry, working things out for them, and then basically manufacturing it and overseeing that it gets to site, that they're happy, that things fit. So it was quite an interesting job.
Prefabrication before everything, before the buzzword, right, started.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But the thing is, no one went on about it because it's not new. It's been going, as I say, it's been going on for a while. It's just a roof truss. It's not complicated, but it is still DFMA. So you know, when people go on about all these things now, it's like, it's not, none of this is new. It's like you go on about it like it's brand. You just thought about it and it's what we need. Yeah, you're right. It is what we need, but the industry is fragmented, and you've got little guys that do this and do that. But there are examples, and have been for a long time, these sort of they're quite innovative, because they're interested in making a markup on, you know, their basic product is wood. They get their wood from Scandinavia. It's slow grown in Scandinavian forests. They treat it. But it's just wood. I mean, how much money can you make on wood? So they do all these other things. So they supply it, they manufacture stuff, they deliver it to site, they give you warranties on things, all this stuff. And they also do things, you know, glue lam. Have you heard of glue lam?
No, not really.
Oh, okay. So it's a technique where they basically use it's kind of the clues in the name, because it's glue and laminate. It's kind of
right.
It's, you know, you have laminate where you have a finish and it just looks like nice wood.
Yeah.
But it's actually a very sort of thin veneer. They basically make these engineered timber trusses or beams and things like that. Yeah, there you go. Oh, you got it in the background. Well done. Yeah.
Nice.
And they kind of look nice. It's stuff that architecturally you can expose it, you can see it, and it looks nice. So depending on the design, you can have these kind of cool curved shapes like you've got there. Yeah, so there are examples of some real nice stuff that's been done with glue lam timber. So
all right, awesome.
And that's what they do. But you can't do that without a bit of BIM.
Yeah, these days BIM actually helps, right, in creating complex shapes, and I mean, especially the execution. So that's more important.
It helps in the sense, if you want things to work, if you're not fussy about things just not working and you figure it out on site, then you can build any shape you want. You always could build any shape you like.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, boats are very complicated shapes, and you know, they haven't been built recently because of BIM. We've been building boats around the world for a long time, and it was done by eye. And you know, it was done by through practice and tradition and things like that, and they didn't tend to sink.
Yeah.
You know, so, and they're extremely complicated shapes. So it is possible. You don't really need all this digital stuff, but the real clever thing is the bringing together of different groups and, you know, different stakeholders, and getting them together. It's the collaborative part that's the clever part, really. The actual doing of things is interesting. It's cool, and you can do cool shapes and interesting geometry. But actually, you always could. That's not the new thing.
So you were part of this firm for more than a year, right?
No, I think it was relatively short. I think it was 6 months or 9 months.
Right.
But I worked in it. It was an old, a converted barn, basically. It had a working farm behind it, but these were some old units that had been converted into offices. And across the way there was an architectural practice, and I used to see them every morning and say hello and go and get coffee with them and stuff. And then I got offered a job there, so I just went across so I was literally working opposite the same company I used to work for.
Awesome.
So I did that, and then I was there for a few years, because I enjoyed that much more, because that was I was working as an architectural assistant, and I wasn't limited to roof trusses. I wasn't limited to a certain part of the building. I used to get frustrated at Donaldson Timber. I'd get frustrated because I wanted to have more say in their design. I wanted to have more involvement, but it wasn't my job. I was there as really I was a sort of sales technician, because I could do. So there was a certain amount of the engineering that went on, but I'm not an engineer. So I could produce calculations. I could produce something. It would do the basic physics for you.
Yeah.
So you'd say, this is the span, this is the pitch, and then it would work out what the sizes of the timber needed to be to make that work. And you could mess with it. You could adjust it and make it more efficient, which was quite cool. But it didn't make me an engineer. Far from it. So it just meant that I could come up with perhaps a slightly more innovative solution to something, despite not being an engineer, which is kind of a sign of the way things are going or beginning to go. And you end up needing to be an engineer, an architect, an interior designer, all these things. You don't just have one discipline anymore.
Yeah, as in like working as a solo architect is not possible. I mean, it is to a certain extent if your projects are sort of smaller in scale, but once you scale up, you need a large team with large expertise also.
Actually, I would disagree with you, because I would say that the way things are going, there's a sort of democratization process going on in the design industry, where you can be an individual architect and you can work on multiple jobs with multiple different stakeholders and still work on, you can scale up and down, because if you're using digital technologies, if you're using BIM, you can be kind of one cog in a big machine and work efficiently.
Right.
You don't have to take it all on. You can take on the stuff that you do. You can specialize. You can be a super specialist. You could just be a super specialist in, like, I don't know, one aspect of design. Like, you could be a super specialist in disabled access and stuff like that, and just do that, but still have meaningful input.
Yeah.
And that could be just your thing.
Yeah, just focus on a niche, right?
That's quite possible. I would say it's more possible, rather than having to employ a very large consultant and say, oh, these guys have got the experts. And it's like, well, actually, you don't need that now. I don't believe when you talk about the ACOMs and the Arcadis and Atkins and anything else begins with A, and all the others, all these big multinational ones, they do have really good guys. But the thing is, you're also paying quite a lot with your fee. You're paying for their overheads. And they have offices all over the place and all these sort of inefficiencies that you're paying for. Whereas if you assemble a small team, that's possible. And also you can get good performance. You don't just have to go to these sort of big names to get, it's not, people look at it, it's almost like a branding exercise. You go, oh, it says Mott MacDonald on my drawing, so that's good. Well, yeah, that is good. And they're a good company. I'm not saying they're not a good company, but it's just that how do they differentiate themselves from everyone else, like ACOM and Atkins, when they're all using the same software? They're all using Revit.
Yeah, absolutely.
they're all basically doing the same thing. They all have a GDC. They all have like guys in India that are doing work for them. And you just go, well, what makes these guys different? It's kind of the same. They just have an office in, they might have guys somewhere. They might have guys in Delhi instead of Bangalore or something, but like they still have the same people essentially working as a back office, because they're trying to like lower their overheads. And then they're all doing it. They're all at it. So I don't believe that you necessarily get something special for all the money that you spend.
But I think they might have the upper hand in terms of automation and adoption of technology might be a bit faster, right?
Again, yes and no. So you can perhaps control it more in an institutionalized way. So you can push things through a department. But I having worked for Atkins and having worked for Mott MacDonald, I've seen on the inside how these big organizations work, and you have an office in Hong Kong and you'll have an office in the UK, and the guys in the UK are streets ahead, because they're looking at they're basically working to different standards, and they're talking about stuff that you haven't even got onto yet in Hong Kong. And yet, as a company, as a client, you employ Mott MacDonald to do your work. But you're not getting these guys that are doing the smart stuff in the UK. You're getting these guys in Hong Kong. And unfortunately, that's the truth of it. And it's not equal.
Yeah, that perfectly makes sense, and in a way, inspires me as well to start off and build a small company, which hopefully would reach those bigger ones, right?
Well, unfortunately, India, it just tends to be seen as a sort of an outsourcing place.
Yeah.
And I don't know what precisely needs to be done to change that, but I do know that the business environment needs to be improved. It's not business friendly. It's actually set up almost to make you abuse people, because people are cheap. Everything's expensive but people, and it makes no sense to me whatsoever, because we have an office in Kolkata, and I know that our costs there in terms of we have to use Tata internet, and they're so expensive because there's no competition. They're unbelievably expensive, and in comparison, the cost in Hong Kong is peanuts. But yet you're in Hong Kong, and everyone goes, "Oh, Hong Kong's expensive." Yeah, and by comparison, internet and electricity are way cheaper in Hong Kong.
Oh, nice.
And also more reliable, because we have loads of power cuts and stuff in Kolkata. We have lots of infrastructure issues. We don't have the same problems in Hong Kong. You know, you do not lose connectivity, but yet you do in Kolkata frequently, many times. Happens a lot.
Yeah, and in terms of salary as well, I mean, I worked for Atkins for a bit. I was pretty happy with the salary which I got, because it was 100% hike from the previous local architecture firm. So it just I mean, I'm supposed to be earning a lot more, but I was pretty satisfied with that salary as well.
Well, I guess it can go further, because you were in Bangalore, aren't you?
Yeah.
And so I was there for 2 weeks when I was with Atkins, and they sent me out there. But what's disgusting is the money that I wasn't paid much for Hong Kong. I was on quite a low wage for Hong Kong, but in comparison to the guys in India, I was like a king. I'm like earning all this money, and it's like, hey, I'm not that good. They sent me out there, for all this expense. They had me put up at the Shangri-La, so I'm in a nice hotel, and there's all these other guys from Atkins, and we're all working on the same project.
Right.
And I didn't. It was so inefficient in a sense. They kind of threw me and didn't really brief me very well about what they expected me to do. I didn't have a team to manage. I was just there to help doing these things. And I was sitting there after a couple of days going, I could do this from Hong Kong. I don't need to be here at all. It's just like a holiday. But 2 weeks and the cost of that. And that's what I mean about, as a client, that's what you're paying for. You're paying for these guys to make these decisions that you think, as a small business, you would never send someone all that way unless you knew there was a good return.
Yeah.
So I know what I'd do if I was spending money. I'd be looking for like these small guys and finding people that I could work with and saying, we can assemble a team ourselves. We don't need to go to the big boys. You do that because you let them project manage it for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's all these inefficiencies built in there. So for the fee to have been high enough to sustain someone like me to go all that way for very little purpose, if I'm honest with you, in terms of I could have done it from my desk in Hong Kong. In fact, I could have done more from Hong Kong, because I didn't have access to the server locally, because I wasn't from that region. And the way that Atkins works, it's like I'm not from that region, and therefore I don't need access to that region. And I didn't have the IT side wasn't up to speed on me being there. So I was actually logging in via Hong Kong from Bangalore, and it's like, this is insane. Why am I doing this? It's the stupidest thing ever. And that's how it was. That's only my experience. Obviously, these are sort of anecdotes, and maybe it's not like that now.
But now there might be a larger shift to remote working, right? I mean, they might see the benefit of saving cost and time as well. I mean, Bangalore traffic as it is crazy.
Sure. I mean, that is another thing which was I thought, like BIM, it's a no-brainer. Remote working, a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But yet there's all this resistance. It's so hard to achieve. And I think one of the reasons is that there's a fear of a lack of control, a loss of control. I need 50 guys. I need to see what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas we've got a team in Kolkata who've been surviving, working. Not everyone. We can't get everyone working, but our manager, our MD in Kolkata, Shweta, she actually had the foresight to set up our people by getting them internet connections where they didn't have internet connections, getting them taxis back to their place with a PC from our office, and had them working when they're all on lockdown.
Nice.
So we still had a team going. We still had some working. Then they got hit by a tropical cyclone.
Yeah.
So then, it's crazy. But yet we were still getting work out the door.
Yeah, but I'm
clients
sure
didn't stop asking for work.
There was a drop in efficiency in some way, right?
Yes, of course. We didn't have a full team. We still don't have a full team. People had problems with power cuts, with internet connectivity and stuff. When when the tropical storm hit, that was a big problem. Lots of people got knocked out. Basically, the whole of Kolkata had no signal.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't put me off remote working, because they're still getting stuff done. And we've actually seen efficiency benefits from people working from home, because they're home. So therefore, if they want to work at 9-10 o'clock at night, they can. Whereas when they were in the office, because the traffic is bad in Kolkata, they were wanting to leave because they want to get home, because it takes so long. If they're already at home, problem solved, and then they can do the things they want to do and then carry on working.
Yeah, I would like to further talk about your company, but before that, just bring you back and maybe discuss. I mean, how did you pick up on all the skills? And I'm sure you started with CAD, right?
Yeah. So going back to that, I do apologize. I did say it could be a long story. You're going to have to manage me quite well and keep me on track. So I got into Chelsea College, and then when I went to do my degree, we were put in front of silicon graphics machines, and we used Archicad. And that's the first time I'd used something like that. I'd used AutoCAD. I knew AutoCAD 2000 from my placement year.
Right.
It was a sandwich degree, so I worked in business for a year, and I worked one place for 6 months, somewhere else for 6 months. So I'd already worked in architect's practice, and I already knew that I enjoyed the experience, which kind of explains the reason why I hopped job quite so soon, because I really enjoyed the way that a practice works. And the way that you're working as a team and you're working together, and the things you do. It's just got a nice sort of vibe to it, and I enjoyed it. So I was happy to go back to that. But it was all CAD work, yeah. But in university, we used, it was Archicad, I think 6.5, so it's pretty old now.
So it was 2002, right? 2003?
No, well, I was using it in about 97, 98, I think.
Oh, wow.
So a long time ago. So, but we weren't doing much with it. It was basic. You have a simple survey of an interior of it's a real building, but it would be a real building in Bournemouth somewhere. That was, we'd have a mock project, and you there's like I think there probably still is. I haven't used Archicad for a while, but there was a magic wand tool where you could basically just turn a CAD drawing into BIM, essentially, because you just click on the walls, you just click on the lines and turn it into walls. And then you could override it, tell it how thick you wanted it and stuff, and say what it was built from, and then set up your sheets for sections and things. Nice. It was so cool, and that was ages ago. It was so long ago, and after that I never ever worked for anywhere that used Archicad. I had one interview for an architect's practice up north in the northwest of England that they admitted to using Archicad, and that's the only time anyone ever. It was just zero. So that's the only thing about Archicad. They have a very small market share, but it's a really good product. It's very, very good.
Yeah, it's really good.
It was powerful. Yeah. Back then it was powerful.
Yeah.
98. So when I saw Revit come along, I laughed because I thought it was rubbish.
Yeah.
I used to use Architectural Desktop, and it was terrible in comparison. I was like, I'm used to Archicad. This is so much, this thing's retarded.
Yeah, Revit
it felt
came
like
much
taking
later,
a step
right?
back. Yeah, Revit. It was like 2002 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And I saw it in maybe 2000 and I'm trying to think now. Yeah, 2003 or something like that. I remember there was some guys from AutoCAD that came to my practice that did a presentation, and I was just laughing, just going, Archicad's already better than this.
Yeah.
And but of course, Autodesk are very big and very American and very aggressive, and they pushed and pushed, and now they've got a huge market share.
Yeah.
And we are where we are. And it has its strengths, but it also has its fundamental weaknesses, which have never been addressed. Like the fact that the engine itself runs in Imperial, so you have to convert to metric. So it's automatically slightly inaccurate from the word go. Everything I work on, and most of the world works on, is metric, not Imperial. And yet, because it's an American product, it has to be Imperial, doesn't it?
But now it's pretty good. I mean, they have generative design, and I have no clue what they have for it in the future as well.
Oh, it's very, very good. And one of the great strengths of Revit is the huge number of people that use it. Means that you're very unlikely to be alone with a problem that no one else has seen before. And that's one of the problems I have with Bentley products. So you have Bentley as a competitor, and they do some cool stuff. Their software can do some cool stuff, and yet I found I would hit a brick wall, because there's not enough people using it. So you can't the forums aren't well populated. There's not enough people to ask these questions. So you end up sort of automatically being this kind of like weirdo specialist, and you don't want to be the only person using Bentley products.
And Bentley is mostly used in infrastructure, right? Larger projects.
It can possibly, yes. It's mainly, I think it's best known for infrastructure, but that doesn't mean it can't do buildings. It's just that perhaps, it's maybe less used. But for example, it was used on when I was at Mott MacDonald. They were doing Thames Tideway, and that was Bentley.
Right.
And it was good. It's a huge project, and it was put together well, and they were doing a good job. So it can definitely do the job. There's no doubt about it, but it just has such a small market share in comparison to Autodesk products. So you end up just by default, it's kind of everything's Autodesk. Everything else feels like an extra.
Yeah, and they're trying to play the monopoly now, right?
Yeah, it's a pity. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate Autodesk. It's just that I like to see some healthy competition, and I know from experience of having used Archicad that it's good. It's really good, and yet it doesn't get anything like the kind of the notice that it deserves. I can't say the same of Bentley because I haven't got the experience. I've only used bits here and there. But I do have a good friend he's a rep for Bentley. He's a sort of technical. I can't remember what his role is, but it's something quite senior in Singapore, and he's turned it. He's like a Bentley evangelist. He loves it.
Yeah.
But my only use of Bentley products really was when I was at Atkins and when I was at Mott MacDonald. I had reason to use certain things like MicroStation for converting something to something else or whatever, or iModels. You have this iModel plugin that you need to use. You have to create iModels.
Oh, okay.
For compatibility with Revit and stuff like that. It always ends up feeling like this kind of the thing about Bentley is their graphical user interface is usually doesn't, it leaves a lot to be desired. So it doesn't look slick. So it looks like you're using old software when you're not.
Yeah.
It tends to be a bit clunky looking, but it's actually totally fine. It does a good job. It's just, yeah. Sorry, I think I've done that thing again when I've gone off on one, haven't I?
Yeah.
What were we meant to be talking about? I've forgotten.
Yeah, I think the best user interface is undoubtedly SketchUp. I mean, it's so simple, right? But yeah, it doesn't come with the technicalities of a BIM software.
Well, it's not BIM.
Yeah, it's not BIM. Yeah,
it's like Rhino. It's not BIM. It will make you some fancy geometry, but it doesn't necessarily know what it's made from.
Yeah,
it doesn't carry the data. So, but it was always meant to be quick and easy. It was meant to be easy enough for even architects to understand. That was the intention with SketchUp, and it used to be free as well when it first started. That was nice. Now it's Trimble, isn't it? Trimble SketchUp.
Yeah.
But it went through a few. It went through a few iterations. I remember using it when it first came out, and it felt like a breath of fresh air. It's like, oh, here we go. This is easy.
Yeah. But how did you pick up on? I mean, was it through the companies that you work for, or?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. So university helped me. So my sandwich year, I learned AutoCAD on just basically at the coalface. I taught myself. Other people taught me simple keyboard commands. People that worked on what was it, R14 or R16, whatever, the old one before, the old AutoCAD before 2000. 2000 was the big change in interface because you started to get tabs.
Yeah.
But before that, it was all keyboard commands. So there were people that were all keyboard commands, whereas I've never been comfortable with that. So I was always right-click. So right-click sub-menus. That's always been the thing that I like. So you hover over escape with your left hand, and on your right hand, it's just like, mouse button for pan.
Yeah.
and zoom, and then you that's everything you need. You've got your tabs, so you've got all your sheets that you can set up. You've got your model space, so you can fly around and put things wherever you like. It's easy. It's really easy to use once you get the basics. And I found MicroStation much more, it felt backwards. It felt inside out. I think it's the same. If you go from MicroStation to AutoCAD, you probably feel the same. My wife, bless her, had to use Vectorworks. She's an architect, and she had to use Vectorworks at her last practice, and she hated it. It's tough because it's just, and again, it's just another interface, another way of using something, and it's difficult when you're used to something else.
And you played many a role, right? You played an architectural technologist role, BIM coordinator, BIM project coordinator, and also digital delivery specialist. So like, was it all, when you jumped these roles, was the type of work the same, or was it getting different, and was it getting more managerial?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, sorry, going back to what I was saying before, that yeah, sure, working in practice helped. Using ArchiCAD in university helped, but you don't. The problem with university is you don't really use anything in anger. So you know the theory of stuff, or you know a little bit about what things to press on.
Yeah.
But you don't really know how to use it when you've got deadlines looming in the same way. You still have deadlines at uni too, of course, but it's not the same as working in an actual working environment. So you then start to feel the pressure more, and you understand more about when you're actually at the coalface, having to deliver, having to do these things. You feel the pain of, why is this so inefficient? Why does this take so long? Why is my computer so slow? You don't worry quite so much at university. You can stay up all night doing stuff if you want, because you don't care, because you're a student. It was easy. You could leave things running in the lab and have things rendering overnight. And it was, whereas if you need to get something done because the client's expecting it, you can't have it crash, things like that. So all these things kind of, you kind of have to learn really by going and doing it, and you have to go and be doing it with someone paying you for it, so that they've got this pressure on you to, look, this is your job, you've got to get this done, kind of thing. Whereas at university, you can flunk it if you want. At university, it doesn't really matter that much, and the lecturer might go, oh, good effort, but it was rubbish. You didn't achieve anything. It's just like, everything crashed, and you what you did was no good. So you really have to learn. There still doesn't seem to be a model that works better than learning on the job, but that's not the full picture. You need the theory, you need some education, you need some chance to practice in a different sort of sandbox environment, but you also have to use it in anger to get to know how to do this, how to do that, what to do, what not to do. So that's how I a lot of it I trained myself. I just jumped in at the deep end because, like I say, with AutoCAD, I didn't really know what I was doing. I knew these kind of, I'd done some stuff at university, and then it turns out when you actually go and work, it's like, I was pretty hopeless to begin with, but then you figure it out, you learn. And so then that was how I got my hands on all these different tools, basically, working for different places. And then I just built out my own kind of resume of experience by just doing it, and then learning all these things. So it's not really been, I have done courses, but it's not really ever been the courses themselves that really trained me up, if I'm honest. It's been the actual going and doing it.
Now, have you also started picking up on Dynamo and maybe some scripting as well?
Not really. I'd like to do more there, but the problem is that I have issues with Dynamo, and one of the reasons is that it's getting better now. Dynamo Studio is improving it because it's pulling it together. But it used to be that you could be, it would basically be one little sort of super geek in the corner of a room full of people, and he's the guy that's the Dynamo guy, and everyone else has no idea what that is, and they don't know what he's doing. But he's saving everyone else like bucket loads of time. But no one really ever really understands or appreciates that, because he's the only one there's only one guy that presses go on the graph, isn't there? On he's put this little script together.
Yeah.
and no one else understands it. They just, if they ever use it, they just go, well, I don't know, but the guy just said, you just open it up and click here, and that's it. And they don't really want to know, and their eyes glaze over when you try to explain it to them. So I've only ever done simple things, very, very simple things, but I can see the power. I can see the benefits. But to me, it also causes some problems where, as I say, it's better now because it's managed better. But one of the problems was managing it across a studio was that it would be, there's different versions of Dynamo, and there's different nodes, and they don't all do the same thing. And the naming of stuff is just completely, because it's based on I don't even know. It's just the way it is because of the
Yeah,
software.
clockwork
It
and so many other
just
names.
has weird names for things that aren't. They're kind of counterintuitive, and you have to kind of learn this whole different way of thinking, which makes it quite difficult to pick up. But it's improving. It is improving, and there is a large community now who are messing about doing stuff. But a lot of it feels like people are just regurgitating the same stuff. They're just reinventing the wheel over and over. That's how it feels.
But I feel like a lot more people are adopting. I mean, they are trying to level up in terms of because these skills would be a prerequisite going forward, right?
You'd like to think so. It's hard to say, if I'm honest with you. Yes, it's definitely a bonus as far as I can see. For me personally, if I see people that have these skills, I'm very, very pleased. Now as an employer, these are the sort of people, if we have someone comes along and says, and they Dynamo, they're at the top of the queue, at the front of the queue. No doubt about it. But the thing is, they're also, pardon the expression, but they're rarer than hen's teeth. You don't see too many. These people, they come along and they're very, very rare.
Yeah, and they pretty much get picked up by the top firms as well.
Yeah, they're not going to come to my little company. They're going to go to Arup, and they're going to go and do something there. They're going to go to Bureau Happold and do something interesting. And the thing is, the stuff that we do, we work with contractors. So the company now, that what I'm doing in Hong Kong is we work closely with contractors. So we're always under the huge pressure to get things out the door. So it tends to be ugly. You haven't got time to make things. You haven't got time to make scripts beautiful and neat. It tends to be just get this done. Which is why if you've got a Kolkata office and you've got 10 guys that are prepared to do it, the whole point of having Dynamo is that you don't need 10 guys. Is that you have one guy that does it.
Yeah.
So we work backwards in that respect. We go, well, actually, we've got the manpower to do this. It's actually not expensive to get these guys to do it.
But are they going through any kind of upskilling program, or maybe just to get up to speed with whatever's happening?
Yeah, we're trying. It's not easy, and especially with things at the moment, we're just lucky to be doing anything at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're just pleased to be having any production.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had all sorts of plans going on about training and progression, and it comes down to things as simple as just the hierarchy in the office of like job titles, because there's a cultural difference with the way that people want to work well, perhaps I wouldn't say the whole of India because it's a big country, but certainly in Kolkata, in that part of India, there's a kind of mentality where people are very funny about their position and what their income is and their seniority and things. So you have to be quite careful what you do.
Yeah.
You can't, because it was very flat previously.
Okay.
And because we didn't really have a lot of segregation in terms of what you call people. It was like, well, everyone's kind of doing modeling work, so they're all kind of modelers. But there's a strong argument to say, you need to split it up more, and because we had coordinators too. But it's just that trying to formalize it a bit more in terms of the way things are managed, and that actually works quite well. I think India likes formal hierarchy more perhaps than European companies and stuff. I think it's just understood more. It's appreciated more. People like that for some reason. Whereas for me, I prefer it to be flat. Yeah. I prefer it to just be able to walk into the boss and tell him what I think. I much prefer that, but that's not the Indian way.
Yeah, people roll eyes at you if you start messaging the boss directly.
It's not the done thing.
Yeah, but how did you move to Hong Kong? And that might be an interesting story, right?
Yeah, sure. So, because I never really answered your previous question a while back.
I think it's like part of the podcast where you could jump in and out. So it's fine. It's interesting.
So I that practice, when I left the timber trust company, the practice I worked for. When I was there, I did I put myself through night school and did an HNC in building studies. And the reason why I did that is, even though I had a degree, I felt I was short in terms of technical ability. I felt that I was working as an architectural assistant, but I wasn't actually a Part 1 architect. I didn't even have an architectural degree. I had an interior design degree. It wasn't RIBA exempt.
Oh,
So I didn't have my part one. So it was like, well, I've got no career progression here because unless I go and do a degree,
yeah.
I'm not part one, so I can't do part two. And so I decided to go down the architectural technology route, where I could keep my degree. I didn't need to do another degree, because, of course, financially it's just insane. By this stage I'm working,
Yeah.
I'm paying off my student loan. It's
And
just not
cold as well,
feasible.
right?
Yeah, you're getting older, and it's just not feasible. You want to have a life, don't you? You actually want to go out and do something and
Yeah.
spend some money on something. And I used to share a house with these guys, and they all worked for BAE, so they're all like working in as sort of defense contractors. They're all working on sort of various projects, and so they're all these kind of project managery type guys. And we had this. We were basically one of the guys coined it. They said we were students with cash flow. We still live like students, but we just had some income. So we were like buying sports cars and stuff. We were idiots. We really were, but it was good fun.
Oh, awesome.
So we just lived that way because we didn't have any like major debts other than paying off student loan. And we were just renting and didn't worry about mortgages and things.
So which car did you guys get?
We had a good collection. It was good. So I had an MX-5. My friend had an MGTF. Then we had a Vauxhall VX220.
Okay.
Which you might not be familiar with. It's like a sort of cheese wedge shape.
Right.
And then one of the guys had a Lotus Elise.
Whoa, nice.
And they were parked on the drive. We had this 4-bedroom house in this lovely estate that we were renting. It was previously rented by a defense contractor and his American guy with his wife, and it was immaculate. And then we moved in.
Awesome.
The neighbors one side hated us. They really did. They didn't like us at all because they thought we brought down the neighborhood. It's like living next door to these idiot students.
Brilliant.
But yeah, it was good fun. It was a great house. But yeah, what I did is I did the HNC and I did the night school, because that's feasible, that's possible. It's not as expensive as a degree, and you can do it and work. So I paid my way and worked my way through that one, and then that meant I could then become a CIAT. I become basically I could join the CIAT, Chartered Institute of Architectural Technologists. And so I kind of had an automatic buy to a basic level of something to say I know something, rather than if I went down the RIBA route, I did try, but in the northwest of England where I was, there were no part-time Part 1 courses.
Right.
There was no distance learning offered, other than Oxford Brookes did one, and that was going to take like 5 years. And he's just going, what, to do a degree? You're kidding me, man. And like, I'm going to be really old by the time I'm an architect. Yeah. So I just thought, forget it. It's not worth it. I need to do something different. I've got sports cars to buy. I don't want to be spending 5 years. It's just insane. It doesn't make any sense when you work with guys that work in other similar but different industries. So they're working as project managers, working in industry. Their progression is completely different to yours. So in construction, you're used to like being a journeyman for like 10 years before anyone takes you seriously. And then you've got these young guys going in and they're building like fighter jets and they're turning up as project managers, and people listen to them because they're project managers. And you're thinking, what the hell? These guys have got billions of pounds riding on them almost on the size of these projects, and teams in Europe and all over the place. And then there's me, and I can't get a guy on site to listen to me because I'm not old enough. And it's like, I'm perfectly qualified to do this. But the way that the industry works, it's like the way that they respect you is through physical seniority. They prefer old people. Oh, you know what you're doing because you're old. No, maybe he's just been doing the wrong thing for like 30 years.
Yeah.
And so definitely BIM and digital is shaking that up big time, because you've got young guys coming in, like the guy that you mentioned when we were talking earlier.
Yeah,
one
absolutely.
of your previous guys, the Finnish guy. And, and he's doing stuff that's kind of almost like rocket science in terms of what they're doing. It's really far out in terms of what the feasibility. And no one's telling him to shut up. They know that he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
So that it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, the barrier of entry is low now, right?
They're coming down.
Yeah.
Definitely. And it's partly because I suppose this is one of the things about Autodesk that you could thank, because of the numbers, the sheer numbers of people that are using the products. And they're getting a sort of an experience that is the same, basically. All these users are all using the sort of same or similar packages. So if there's enough people using Revit, there's enough people using Civil 3D, and they all understand the interoperability issues. They all understand these sort of basic issues. So they're all kind of on the same page, which makes it easier for a newbie to come in, because there's a whole like wealth of knowledge about how all this stuff works.
Yeah.
It does make it easier, definitely. And when you think about things like 3D printing and stuff like that, that used to be really out there. That was kind of like, oh, you need to have this huge machine and a big expensive company that can actually afford to like do these things. And now it's like 2,000 or 3,000 Hong Kong dollars. So it's not much money basically to build one or buy one and assemble it yourself or whatever and start 3D printing.
Yeah. I guess
It's very
in the
easy.
future,
I've done some. I'm an idiot and I've done some.
Oh, nice.
I don't know what I'm doing. STL file. Here you go. Done. It's so easy. Honestly, I mean, I made so many mistakes. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't just one button, but
Yeah.
it's not difficult. It's really not difficult.
And coming back to the main question, like, how did you reach the position of becoming a director at the studio? This is a firm called Integrated Design Asia, right?
Yeah. So Integrated Designer is a Hong Kong-based company, and we've got an office in Kolkata. That's our back office, our engine room. We've got the studio or the office in Wan Chai in Hong Kong, who we basically sort of project manage. We have the coordinators and the project managers who tend to be site-based, tend to be client-facing, tend to be working on site with the teams, with the site engineers, and they tend to be qualified engineers, architects, that kind of thing. But we're still very small in terms of the size of the team. Say maybe 50 guys in Kolkata, but then we've got like I think 12 now in Hong Kong.
Right.
And then we've got the Singapore office as well. We started reaching into Singapore before the whole kind of like COVID-19 thing hit. So technically we have a presence, but we don't have stuff going on much. There's like one thing that's happening in Singapore right now for us, but we're looking to expand for sure. And I got in there basically through the back door as a bit of a coup, if I'm honest with you, because there's two other directors. There's Jay and Jake, who are already established. And Jake approached me when I was at Mott's and asked me if I'd come and join his company. And I said, no, thank you, because I was working at Mott's and I didn't see the benefit. You know,
Right.
It wasn't enough reason to leave Mott McDonald to go and work for a small company. You know, it was to work on the IWMF project, the Integrated Waste Management Facility. So it's a real big project, 30 odd billion Hong Kong dollars for a 16-hectare site.
Oh, wow.
Reclamation with all this stuff on. I mean, but this is Hong Kong. This is the sort of thing that's kind of like, it's almost like bread and butter for Hong Kong. It's only places like Hong Kong that do this crazy stuff. They build these huge bridges. Nowhere else does stuff like that.
Yeah.
You have to go to the Middle East before they start doing something similar. So the difference between you've just brought it up. The difference between that and the sort of 3-4 million pounds projects I was working on in the UK. Admittedly, I was working for smaller firms, but I was doing 56 bed hotels in the Lake District, and then you come to Hong Kong and you're building, you're building man-made islands with incinerators on them. It's just it's like going to the moon. It's insane in comparison. The difference, the size of the jobs is just it's nuts.
But is it on the suburbs? Because Hong Kong seems pretty claustrophobic, right?
Hong Kong is tiny, but it's really quite beautiful if you just don't go into central. So you've got central Hong Kong, you've got Hong Kong Island, you've got Victoria Harbour, you've got the bits that people sort of know more abroad, but it's a tropical paradise. It's basically mountains, and there's all these places, these country parks you can walk in. A very large percentage of Hong Kong is country parks. So actually, there's a lot of places where you can go and you can walk, and you will see other people. That's one thing you do find in Hong Kong. You're very seldom alone. There's usually someone, even early in the morning, there'll be some old guy exercising. There'll be like some old man that's like stretching.
Yeah.
And you're on top of a mountain. You go, what the hell's he doing here? You see people everywhere. But in a way, I suppose, no different to India. There's always people. It's a very populous place. But there's actually space. There is space in the new territories. There is room for stuff.
All right.
So yes, because Hong Kong, they make a new island to make some new land, but actually, technically speaking, there is space at brownfield sites, old farmland that's not used anymore, but becomes political, unfortunately.
All right. And what are the kind of projects that your firm works on?
We do mainly parts of or complete large infrastructure projects. So we have work at the airport, we have work at West Kowloon. So West Kowloon is another very large infrastructure project where there's a master plan and there's all these buildings that go around the site where there's a theatre, the Chinese theatre. There's a very large museum, so M+ Museum. It was Herzog and de Meuron were the architects for this. And Farrell's Farrell's in Hong Kong that did the local side of it. They had a local architect, but it was Herzog and de Meuron with the original design. And that's one that we were working on for the contractor. So we were doing contractor BIM stuff on site. And we've got the Lyric Theatre as well with the contractor, which is another huge building. They're all silly big stuff. Big tunnels, big bridges, big buildings.
So your firm was managing
that's the kind of stuff we get involved in.
Digital side of things, right?
Yeah, so we have different roles in the sense that sometimes we help the contractor by providing outsourcing and additional manpower. But then other projects like IWMF, we have an actual managerial role where we're the BIM manager on behalf of the joint venture. So there's a joint venture between Keppel Sagers, who are the Belgian and Singaporean specialists in waste to energy. And then we have China Harbour or Junhua, who are the local contractor that's doing the reclamation and the construction work. And that's the joint venture. And I'm the BIM manager for them. So they talk to me about what they need and what they want, and I'm supposed to sort of boss the consultants around. So the main designer, the lead designer is Arcadis with DLN Architects. So DLN is the local architect, and Arcadis is the consultant. And then there's all these other consultants that are coming in for doing different things, landscaping and all sorts of other stuff. It's extremely technical and complex. It's a hugely complex project, if I'm honest with you. And it desperately needs BIM, and we are doing our best to see that things are done properly, but it's very difficult to achieve, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah, especially if the architects and the consultants are not up to speed with the BIM tools, right?
Yeah, that's been one of the toughies. So the consultants, so Arcadis, for example, they have their own GDC, which is they work with an outsourcing team in Manila.
Right.
Similar thing again, and so they have their guys that are doing the actual modeling work, and in a remote location. There's nothing wrong with that at all. It's just that when I've worked on projects that have really worked, what you have is a co-located team. So when I worked at Atkins, we had a co-located team for a Doha Metro. We worked on the Gold Line of Doha Metro, and our team in Hong Kong had 3 interchange stations, X-type interchange stations, and they were all different. Each one was different to the other. There was very little that was the same in all 3. And we had architects, MEP, and structural engineers all working co-located, sitting together, working together, and that worked really well. And the engineers were doing BIM; they were actually modelling.
Nice.
Not all of them. Lots of them weren't. Lots of them just they resist. They don't want to touch it. But we did have enough. The architects were very good, actually. They really took it on and ran with it, and we had a really good team. We were very lucky, and it worked really well. So I'm not saying you can't do remote working, because of course you can, and that's what our business relies on. But if you want to do it, in my opinion, if you really want to do it properly, the actual you wouldn't need outsourcing, because the engineers and the architects would be doing this already. So we quite often get work because other people do not do the work.
Yeah.
I was going to say long term, it isn't really truly sustainable if we're to believe that this is the future and that everyone will be BIM literate. Well, I know that we have work because they're not BIM literate and they don't want to be. So that's our market.
Yeah.
People want to manage, but they don't want to spin models around like we do.
Yeah. And BIM in Hong Kong must be big, right? Like the market I feel even the government must have mandated things, right? What's the scenario?
Yeah, it was mandated. There was a technical circular. They do things differently here, obviously. There was none of this BIM level 2, UK style, giving people advance warning. This was literally a technical circular that was sent round in the end of 2017 saying at the beginning of 2018, January the 1st, you'll be doing BIM.
Yeah.
Simple as that. That was technical circular that just says this is what you'll do.
Right.
And so that was it. It was mandated on everything above 30 million Hong Kong dollars, which is any government work above 30 million is, you can't dig a hole in Hong Kong for less than 30 million, really. So it's pretty much every project.
Right.
And any infrastructure project was going to be needing BIM. Any large structure is going to be needing BIM. So that was quite a big deal, actually. Overnight, suddenly BIM. And then each year they've brought out, or through the year they brought out new technical circulars. For example, the following year they upped the ante slightly, but they asked for more. They mandated more. Mm-hmm. So they had a list of like optional and mandatory, and they sort of added to the optional items started to become mandatory as well. So it's quite good. I think they're doing it right in that regard, in the sense that I think you do have to push from the top. It's not just, it doesn't work from bottom up.
Mm-hmm.
It has to come from the top, but also it has to come from the bottom up as well. You have to have people that are pushed and trained and want to do this stuff.
All right. And what kind of standards were you following? I mean, there weren't any BIM standards in Hong Kong, right?
It was a mixed bag, and there weren't any. There was a CIC BIM standard that was released before it was available before the mandatory use of BIM, but it wasn't. I don't think it was really truly followed. And then you've got different sort of organisations like AA, so Airport Authority, or
right.
MTR, for example, the large sort of quasi-government organisations. Basically, they're sort of semi-government, and they have their own standards that they develop and things that they insist on. So it's not all kind of like joined up. That is one of the problems. So if you do a job for the Airport Authority, they want things done perhaps slightly differently to West Kowloon Cultural District might have. Right. They have a different requirement, but it's all in Hong Kong, and they're all kind of government projects. They're all kind of publicly funded or semi-publicly funded. MTR, as an example, they have things they want to do things slightly differently again.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to sort that out now, because I was involved in there was a series. There was these series of BIM meetings. There was like a team that was put together, and they were asking people to come up with comments and things about the new ideas pushed forward for standardization and this and that. So they're going down the building smart route, and they're trying
right.
to open it out a little bit in terms of open BIM, which would be great. I don't see it suddenly flipping overnight from Autodesk at all.
Yeah.
But I think they're doing the right things by and large.
Yeah, the problem is there's too many BIM standards, right? Even though there's ISO 19650, every country has their own kind of standards and processes.
Yeah, and every business as well. So, all these large organizations like Atkins will have a BIM standard.
Yeah.
But the way that it was run was that which to me makes perfect sense, as you say, well, you have, as an organization, you have a BIM standard, you have a BIM execution plan template, you have a BIM sort of definition and standard way of like, this is our standard method of working, this is our standard method of interoperability, things like that.
Yeah.
And you say that's our default, and we will use our default in the absence of anything from the client that says we need to use something else, which makes sense, because that fills in the gaps. Because quite often the client, they do not say anything as simple, in terms of an EIR. There's no information requirement. There's no employer's information requirement. The way that it's meant to be, there's nothing saying, here you go, this is what we want, and this is how we want it. Usually you have to help them figure that out. So it's quite difficult to it's not like a menu that's nice and neat, and you can say, well, they want this, this, and this, and here you go. So quite often there's gaps in what they're asking for. There's also lots and lots and lots of really funny and bizarre examples of one of my roles since I've stepped up to be a director is I look at a lot of tenders. So I'm looking at a lot of requirements that are sent out, and there is commonality there, but they're all tend to be different. It depends who you get them from. Different contractors give you better information. Different clients give you better information. Some are very cagey about even telling you how long the project is. So you're like, well, how the hell do I price that when I don't know how much work you want? Is it 2 years or is it a week? I don't know. So it's difficult. But some guys are very helpful, and they will give you everything kind of laid out quite neatly. But there's an ex-colleague of mine who's now in Sydney at WSP. He's quite senior at WSP, but he and I put together. He came up with he bought the domain, but he's set up a website called bimbollocks.com. Where we like to put funny things that we find. And I the ones I tend to put there are things which I find when I'm looking at tenders where they just ask for just the most ridiculous stuff. Things that you just go, we couldn't deliver this the way you're asking for it if we tried. It's impossible. There was a very good example. Someone wanted LOD 600.
Oh wow!
Like, what's LOD 600? Like it's more than as built. So what does it mean? Is it you want it demolished as well? I mean, it wasn't very. It's just people that I think maybe get something off the internet and have half an idea, but they don't really know what they're talking about, but they have to write the spec. It's improving. It is improving. You do get more sense, but there's still lots of examples of very, very badly written requirements.
Yeah, but that increases your scope, right? As I'm sure, like you're the lead appointed party, right? You'd
think it would be a good thing, but you'd think it would give you more opportunity to make some money somewhere. But actually, it feels like it gives clients more opportunity to beat you over the head with a stick.
Exactly.
Because you haven't done something that a lot of it seems to stem. It comes down to it's kind of managing their expectations. So quite often you get clients that think that because BIM, everything is in the model. Everything? I mean, I've had arguments, and they're literally saying they expect like carpet finishes, but you didn't specify it. You know, if you don't ask for this stuff, it's not going to be in the model, is it? But they think but I asked for BIM. Yeah, there's a lot of different flavors of BIM. It's not as simple as just saying you want some. How much BIM would you like on that? It's like a topping on your toast. How much BIM would you like? What flavor BIM? You really have to. The way to do it properly. And there's an ex-colleague of mine who's now a senior guy at Ecodomus. I don't know, have you ever come across Ecodomus? They're the sort of the FM, AM guys. They help to connect BIM to sort of
Ecodomus
databases and Ecodomus, yeah.
That's EEC.
Right. Eco, ECO, DOMUS. Ecodomus.
Right. Life cycle.
Yeah, and he's really understood for a long time that really the crux of the issue is nothing to do with design, nothing to do with construction. It's to do with operations, and it works backwards. So you start at operations and say, right, you're going to have a facility to operate. Most of the expense in anything that you build, 80-90% of the cost, life cycle cost, is in the operation. You might spend billions on a building, but you're going to spend a lot more than that running the thing over the next 30 years, or especially if it's a railway. Railways designed for 100 years or something. And you're going, you didn't really think it through. There's no excuse at all. You should be starting at operations, working backwards, which then helps to define things like the employer's information requirement. But unfortunately, the way things work, contractually, the way things work is that it's seldom the case, and that we won't ever be approached by a facilities operator. They will talk to someone else, and eventually we get involved, and we get involved much later down the line when all of these decisions have already been taken. So we're just there to kind of stick some BIM on it. We've got this project. Can you give us some BIM? Yeah, okay, we can model it. So we do a lot of backwards BIM, where you'll have something that's kind of like designed but not coordinated, and we've got some 2D and we'd like some BIM. Okay, so they don't want to spend too much on it. Can you do it? Can you do it quick, and can you do it cheap? Well, we can, but what do you want to do with it? Oh, we just need some BIM. Okay. So really the best stuff is when you can identify, mitigate risk for the contractor, or mitigate risk for the ultimate client, for the operator, save them some money, save them some time, improve the design. Maybe you pick issues that are haven't really been thought through, coordination problems. So for example, IWMF is a massive coordination exercise,
right?
because it's pipes and
Yeah, there's a lot
gantries
of
yeah.
It looks like
So
a chipset when you see it on the screen.
yeah,
So much
so
happening.
and you've got all these specific functions. All this equipment has a specific function and a specific efficiency, and they're all designed to specific, the amount of energy that goes in, or the amount of heat that's released, and all these things, and it affects other things.
Yeah.
And it's not as simple as just a building with a bit of HVAC, and all you've got to do is worry about what temperature is, most of the year. Or something. All of that seems very simple in comparison. This is they've got chemical dosing. They've got hundreds of trucks that have to drive around. It's all of the waste is delivered by ship, and taken off in containers, and then the containers are put onto trucks, and the trucks drive in and tip them in the tipping hall into the bunker. The bunker picks them up with a big crane, puts them into the incinerator. The incinerator burns them, but then they have to collect the ash, the bottom ash, which is very, very toxic. And then, of course, the exhaust gas has to be scrubbed to take out all of the unpleasantness, because they've got standards for what you're allowed to release in terms of the pollution. But there is always some pollution. You can't burn waste at low temperature and not have some unpleasant pollution. But you get it down very low, which is part of the reason why it's an island away from everything else, so that what comes out the smokestack is distributed, so you don't have people living next door to it.
Right.
But what you can see there, if you scroll up, it's just a wireframe of the model.
Right. And this is a Revit model, right?
Yes, it's all in Revit.
Wow.
There is there will be some Civil 3D under there, but all the buildings are Revit.
Now, what is this long tower here?
Oh, that's the chimney.
Oh, right.
6 stacks.
Wow.
160 meters or something.
So what stage is it at right now? Is it like...
It's still designing. So they're on site with the reclamation. So the reclamation is happening. There's caissons, the big concrete boxes that they have to sink into position that build the seawall.
Right.
Those are being manufactured and put into place already. What you see there, the steel frame, that's basically where the plants will go. So that's just the frame where all the equipment sits in. And there's six lines, 6 incinerators, and they're going to drive this in with a huge machine, which basically will just deliver it. These sort of multi-wheeled platforms. Right. They're going to drive it in off a barge and put it into position, and then build the building around it. Essentially, they'll zip it up afterwards.
Awesome.
It'll be semi-built, but they'll basically build the cladding after they put the equipment in. It's quite impressive. Right. And it has to have the public there as well. It has a public viewing gallery and all these other things. So it's meant to be an educational experience. So they're meant to get school trips to go and see the incinerator working. And
nice.
It's got a turbine hall with 3 turbines that will generate, I think it was something like up to 100 gigawatts. No, megawatts, sorry, 100 megawatts. But it's waste of energy. It produces energy as well.
How does this... how does this project start? Like, what is the starting process for a typical project for you guys? Whether it's a tendering or...
Currently we tend to be asked by a lot of our BIM is for contractors. So we're there to help things smoothly operate on site, to identify issues, to build the models and put them together to say this doesn't fit, this is a clash, you can't build it like that. To work out, to do the 4D simulation, things like that. So that's the sort of stuff that we do.
No, you may have to create a BIM execution plan to get the projects, right?
Yeah, sure. We do that. That's a large part of what we have to do. Right. So we do technical, workflows and all of the stuff that goes into BIM execution plans about how it's all meant to fit together. We build templates and families, and we can manage all that. And we've seen there's a move much more because of Autodesk is driving it. There's a move much more towards Forge and BIM 360.
Yeah.
So lots
Web,
more of our
right?
projects are in the cloud now,
Yeah.
which actually works in our favor. It's easier for us to work in the cloud because we can easily work with our guys in India that way. It was much harder previously when you had to use Revit Server because you'd basically have this kind of like they have to like work on something and then they have to sync and save and upload changes and stuff and working in the cloud that way and it's all based on Amazon Web
AWS,
Services.
yeah.
So yeah, so it's got the capacity, it's scalable, it's reliable, it's pretty good.
So essentially your
it's much better way of
CDs would
working.
be in AWS, right?
Yeah, we would use, well, yes, BIM 360 is the sort of the de facto platform. And then if you're sitting on Forge, you then get certain automation should come with that. The ability, anyway, it isn't always really used, but there's certain things you can get. So I'm always looking to try to get KPIs out of projects where you can quite easily extract stuff, put it into Power BI, get some nice dashboards. So I'm fortunate actually because my two colleagues, my directors that I work with, they were running the company before me. I joined, you know, because they basically I never finished the story, but I was asked to join, and I said not just for a project, and then talked to my wife about it, and she said, what would it take for you to join? And I said, oh, you know, a part of the company or something like that. And she said, well, what's the worst that could happen? Why don't you go and ask? So I went back saying, can I be a director? And they thought about it and said, oh, okay then.
Oh, nice.
So that's how. But as I said, I did tell you it was kind of through the back door, and I'm fortunate because it's not all on my own shoulders. They're good. They are pretty good at what they do. So for me, it's just nothing really changed. I'm still managing the same project. I'll just look at some tenders. You know, I get to see some emails, maybe interview some people, but you know, to be honest with you, it's not been too bad.
And then they're not architects, right? Your co-directors.
One has an architectural background in the US. He's not a fully qualified architect, but he's I think an associate they call it. It's it's like the US style. It's a bit different. I'm not sure how that would register as RIBA. It might be Part 1 or something. I don't know what you'd call that. And in terms of my other colleague Jay, he is like a machine because he's Chinese. You know, they just work hard, don't they?
Right.
So he's got qualifications coming out his ears, and he's an MEP guy.
Awesome.
He's very, very good. So I've basically got two very decent directors to work with. That makes my life much easier, if I'm honest with you.
I just want to interject. Do you feel that, you know, there's so much of BIM, and do you feel that sometimes BIM is overkill? I mean, because some countries do not have BIM at all, right? But they still manage to get things done, and it works to a certain extent.
Well, yeah, by and large, the problem is your questions, they're annoying because they're kind of like yes and no. Yeah. So yeah, what you say is true. You can do everything perfectly well without using BIM, no problem. Where you start to have problems is really BIM should just be business as usual. It should not be seen as an extra. It should just be this is the default way of working. And the reason I say that is because until you're using BIM, until you have the model, you don't have the data in this kind of like, if you see it as just a database exercise, you can either work with a database that has people's phone numbers in, or you can have a database that has people's phone numbers plus the businesses they work from, plus, plus the last business they work for maybe. And, you know, in terms of, if it was just a sort of like sales thing, you're looking at like something which gives you a very skeleton piece of information versus like a real nice deep dive into what these people did and where they came from in terms of a database. And if you see that instead of people, instead of a sales thing, if you see that as, okay, now turn it into a construction project and all of the things that you need to know. There's people too, but everything about every single element in that project in terms of where it is in XYZ space, but also what it's made of and how it's expected to perform. It will tell you all of these things because it will give you material properties. It will tell you all this stuff, or at least it can do. So you can have this database that has a lot of depth to it, a lot of trees of information. You click on something, it can tell you a lot of stuff about that. And if you have that, you can then do a lot more with it. So I mentioned a long time back about STL files and 3D models. You can do 3D printing, a physical 3D print, but if you have 2D, you would have to build a model to do the 3D print. So it isn't easy anymore. It's not fun. Whereas on IWMF, because we had models, the design doesn't have to be finished, but that's the whole point. The design doesn't need to be finished because it's just a 3D print. So you can say, hey, what do you think to this? And because it's tactile, because it's physical, people really love it, and they join in. They join the dots between that. This is one of my problems, has been trying to get people to buy into BIM, to buy into digital, and to start using it. And what I found is what works is you have to find, like with anything, I suppose, when you're trying to get someone to change their way of doing something, you have to get them to see it in the way that appeals to them. So for me, it's a no-brainer. But if I just stand on a soapbox and tell them, you're stupid, why don't you do BIM? I'm not going to get any buy-in. So I have to see it from their point of view and say, what appeals to them? So if they're a money guy, they're just thinking about, brass tacks. They're thinking about the cost of stuff all the time. So if I can appeal to them that there is a benefit here for you in terms of the cost, or I can appeal to the contractor and say, mitigating risk so that you don't then have to worry quite so much about all of the claims that come in after you've built the thing, when they say you didn't do this and you didn't do that, and you can say, oh, we've got a forensic record of all the decisions that we're making, that were made throughout the project. If you say you're going to be so much more watertight that way than you would if you just had stuff on sheets of paper that you can't even find.
I think you just listed out all the great advantages of BIM.
So you have to kind of sell it in the way that it appeals to the individual that's considering buying. And that's the thing that I found is it works, but it's tricky. You have to find that. You have to kind of get to know people and get to know what they care about.
All right.
That was my job at MOTS, really, with the digital delivery. It was reaching out and trying to get people to see certain things a certain way, and I enjoyed it, actually. It was good.
All right. And where do you see yourself maybe like 5 years from now?
I think in terms of ideally where I'd be is I'd still be in Hong Kong. My daughters would still be here at school because, say, for example, I wouldn't even be wanting to I've got 2 daughters, and they'll be going to local school, so they'll be learning Chinese.
How old are they?
My eldest is 4 and my youngest is 2.5. So
nice.
So the eldest is just going to school, but she literally just started, and then the whole virus thing meant that everyone didn't go back again. So she's kind of already had her first year and didn't really go to school that much. But sort of moving on, I want them to learn Chinese. I want them to experience growing up in Hong Kong. So that means that I'll be here and my wife will be here for a while longer. What I'll be doing in Hong Kong, I don't know, because the company now, we're doing kind of okay. We've been hit pretty hard. Everyone's been hit pretty hard by the what's going on with the trade war between China and the US. We're kind of in the middle of it here.
Right.
And they've literally just kind of started a big ruckus with China of bringing in this national security law, which is causing major headaches. Because there's lots of nervousness with what it means, because they're talking about sedition. They're talking about things that the problem is that you've got all these people, all these sort of talking heads that are coming up saying they support the law, but we still don't know what it means yet. It hasn't even been defined. So we're not even sure how it's going to affect everyone. But there's lots of fear. There's lots of fear and uncertainty. And I had one of my ex-colleagues, local Chinese guy, who asked me, because I'm British, he asked me to endorse his British passport application. Bless him. So you've got people that they're worried, and so they're looking for backup and a way out if they have to. And that's a very difficult place to be. So when you say 5 years, you think, I'm not sure about where we're going to be in like 5 months, the way things are going. They're talking about the law being introduced by August.
Right.
So I would like to think that by August we would know with some certainty what that means. In terms of the future for Hong Kong, it's hard to say. I mean, we've got options. We've got Singapore. We've got our team in Kolkata. So we just need clients. I don't think people are going to suddenly stop getting stuff built. The only fear is that if politics gets involved, then we might struggle a little bit, because we're an international company. We're run by foreigners. So there's me, I'm British, the other director's American. So that's not really a good mix right now. We're kind of like public enemy number one. And then the other director, he is Chinese, mainland Chinese. He's from Shanghai.
Right.
So maybe if we just disappear and he carries on, he'll be fine. Maybe, I don't know.
Right.
we just become regular employees and not directors. It's really hard to say how it's going to affect everything. But ideally, we would still be here and still be working, still doing something in BIM, still building stuff, I would hope.
Awesome.
And I think that we've got a lot of projects on. We're pretty healthy, to be honest with you. But it's just very hard right now to see very far ahead. There's lots of disruption with all the nonsense with things being on lockdown and closed down, and just makes it hard to make decisions.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how much the governments or the investors are going to invest in architecture now, because post-COVID, it's going to be a bit different, right?
Yeah, you'd like to think it would have some effects on certainly the way things are laid out in terms of entrances and exits, lift capacity. Maybe they have to then start having standby lifts so that you have a spare for, if there's a transmission in the building, they'd have to start looking. One of the problems they've had in Hong Kong is actually people seemingly being infected by through the soil waste pipe, so through drainage. But they know that the virus lives on for quite a long time in the gut.
Yeah.
So that basically there's a strong argument that if you have somewhere that has poor sanitation, not that Hong Kong's necessarily got poor sanitation, but even somewhere like Hong Kong, you do have vapor that comes from the soil vent pipe, and they've had someone that was infected, they believe, from the vent pipe of the building, and then basically just the effect of the air going across the top of the building and drawing air in at a lower level. They reckon there was enough. Basically, the air carried enough virus load from what was released from the vent pipe. So you think, well, they're now going to have to engineer things completely differently if that's the case.
Yeah,
which is quite interesting. So it's very hard to say, but yeah, it should start to make. Well, you'd think BIM would be perfectly placed to help with these things. You can start to optimize layouts. You can start to use algorithms to figure things out for you. I think it's going to be necessary. I don't think it's going to be an option, if I'm honest with you. I think it's going to have to happen, but quite how, I don't know exactly. But we're here to help. Integrated Design is here to help anyone that needs some digital BIM stuff. Well, I mean, it's just it's just there's so many questions. If I'm honest with you, there's so many.
Yeah.
Where you just go, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
go
really
on
know.
and on, right?
Yeah, it's every single item. All these points are in themselves it's like a podcast on its own, just to discuss that.
Yeah. Last question to you would be like, I just want to be, since you've stayed in Hong Kong for so long, I'm just curious to know how much, if the housing problem in Hong Kong can be solved as per your take.
Well, the funny thing is, so the housing authority in Hong Kong build public housing, and it's all multi-story tower blocks. They have a kind of template way of working. They've been using BIM on all their projects since, say, 2014. They are trying to do it in quite an intelligent way. They don't call it DFMA, it's MIC here, so it's modular integrated construction, but it's very similar to DFMA in the sense that the facades of the buildings are manufactured the other side of the border in mainland China, and you see them truck them in. They truck them in as prefabricated units and they crane them up into site, but they still do a lot of in situ. Even the concrete frame, the podium, all of that, they tend to work still with shear walls and transfer slabs, and there are all these enormous amounts of concrete with rebar in. That's just how they work. That's what they like, and they understand it. Really, to me, it should be almost like a kit that just turns up. There should be very little in situ. There should be more automation. There should be more intelligent use of tagging and kind of RFID tags and QR codes for equipment and things, so you can scan things. They do things. So like certain government departments, they've done some really quite interesting stuff with RFID tagging and stuff, but it's just not universal. That's the thing, and you'd think that Hong Kong would be perfect for all this, because you have these very small, tight sites where it should be perfect for just in time, where stuff just arrives and is craned into position. They've done stuff in London that they had literally trucks queuing up the road, and then they would take off a unit and crane it up, and then next, and they'd be doing like one every averages out on one every 4 or 5 minutes or something.
Yes.
And they're putting this into place, and you think, why can't they do that more in Hong Kong? I know that there's issues with they're very conservative in terms of sort of safety factors and wind loads and things like that because of the typhoons and stuff like that, but I still believe that this is completely possible to do, totally possible, and I think they're just not trying hard enough. People are they're too conservative.
Yeah, it's like how mainland China built an hospital in less than 10 days, right?
Yeah, it can be done. I mean, yeah, you might have a few issues with leaks and what have you, but you can do it. It can be done, and because there's problems, it shouldn't. What happens is there's problems, and they just go, "Oh, I don't want to do that. It doesn't work." Well, why would it work perfectly first time? You basically you rinse and repeat, and then you learn your lessons, and then you get it right.
Yeah.
You don't think the first person that built a reinforced concrete structure got it right perfectly first time. They had all sorts of problems with exposed rebar and things that they had to learn. But over time, you perfect it. So they just need to perfect the method of off-site manufacture, bringing things into place. There are examples. There's projects we're working on where they're doing a lot of off-site manufacture and bringing things in, and IWMF is one of them. They're prefabricating all of the process units and bringing them in. They're bringing the caissons, for example. They're manufactured in mainland China. They're brought into site and they're sunk into place. So there is quite a lot of sort of pre-manufacture that happens. But then I think from my point of view, I was designing or engineering or selling trusses, whatever it was that you call my role, and I was doing that years ago, and I know how easy it is. I was doing it, and it is so easy to push the button and it goes to manufacture. We could be doing that with so much more. We really could. We could be doing it next week. The software is not the problem. The hardware is not the problem. The problem is people. They just don't want to do it.
Yeah, and I feel in the future there would be a total automation with drones and stuff, right? Robotics, and that would be interesting to see.
There's an interesting. I mean, there's examples. There's a chap I met called Ben. I think his name's Ben, and it is Archistar was his company. That he's out in Australia.
Right.
And I met him at this talk in Bangkok. Makes me sound really jet set, but I basically don't go anywhere. I'm a dad. I hardly go anywhere, so this was quite rare.
Right.
But he was a very interesting guy because I think it's Benjamin Corey. I think his name is. You can find him on LinkedIn. He's on my LinkedIn. And Archistar is his company, and he's trying to get it so that it basically scrapes data for if you want to. For example, if you want to, as a developer, you want to buy a site and you're looking to build a hotel, and it will tell you automatically when you use the software, it sort of like overlays. It's kind of like smart city stuff. It overlays all this other data, any public data it can get its hands on.
Right.
Where he has a team that help to sort of scrub the data and tidy it up. But basically, you have a site and you say, this site in Melbourne, you want to build a 50-story structure. They'll say, oh, you can't. It'll automatically tell you that you can only go up to 30 stories there. And
wow.
It automatically overlays all of it's basically like playing city skylines. It's like playing a game. So you just say, oh, this is what I want to do. And it kind of automatically tells you height restrictions and limitations on infrastructure and things like that.
Nice.
It's very cool. And that's totally the way things should be. And so I wish him all the best with what he's trying to do. I don't know whether he'll make it, because I think there's other platforms that are all trying to do similar things. But it's very, very good. Encouraging.
If there's one thing this pandemic has helped is like it's fast forwarded the process of digital adoption. I mean, a lot of people are getting to it now.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's people are seeing the light. Which again, as I say, it's frustrating for me because I think it's a no-brainer. It seems obvious, but
Yeah.
You have to remember that not everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
So what to me is just, from my perspective, stupid to try and do it any other way. And obviously, the fact that we can do this now, this podcast is no problem at all. It's so easy.
Yeah.
And yet people would, have an issue with not having to be in their office and got to make a call. It's just no big deal. You can actually get just as much work done, if not more.
Absolutely.
Because you can kind of have things the way you want them and how you need them, and then you're kind of you're insulated from any issues like pandemics. You're still working. All you need is the internet and some power, and you're good to go.
All right, Simon. So that was one hell of a session. I mean, we talked quite a lot about a lot of interesting stuff. So before I let you go, we'll just quickly jump into the quickfire round and then wrap it up.
Okay.
All right. So which book has inspired you the most so far? I mean, or what are the kind of books that's inspired you?
Funnily enough, I'm into science fiction.
Nice.
I don't know whether you could have known that. I'm a bit out there. So I'm a big fan of Ian M. Banks novels.
Right.
And one of the best ones I read I read it at university, and it just a light bulb went off in my head, and it's called Fearsome Engine. It's an Ian M. Banks novel, and it's got a character that speaks phonetically, so that it does your head in. When you first read it, the way his text is written, it's written like kind of the way you'd say it. So it takes a little while to kind of like translate it, but after a time, you're reading that faster than you're reading the normal English stuff.
Right.
But it's anyway. That's your answer.
What's on your playlist right now?
I'm a big fan of SoundCloud. So my playlist is. They tend to be quite eclectic collections of stuff. So there's a guy called Quantic who does these lovely little mixes of kind of like South American sort of Latin jazz stuff, which I've got into. It's brilliant because you just find stuff that I wouldn't have really known I liked, to be honest with you. So that's been my recent thing. Yeah.
Which city would you consider your favorite?
I would have to say Hong Kong. I've been here 7 years now. And, I really do love the place. It gets under your skin. They say that of Hong Kong. If you're here for 2 years and then you stay, you don't live. You never leave.
Okay. Was there any mentor in your life or someone who's inspired you a lot?
Yes, there've been several. Probably in terms of BIM, one of the most helpful people is Brendan, who he's in WSP in Sydney, who I mentioned earlier. He's been very influential in terms of helping me to see how perhaps he's got a very nice manner. He's just got a very nice way of sort of like approaching stuff. So and he explained it really well in terms of how a BIM manager should be, and it's that he should be like a pilot of an aircraft. That basically you don't need to see or hear or know the pilot is doing anything. It can be all autopilot, but when there's a problem, you need them, so you need to know they're there.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time, a project is moving along quite smoothly, and you're not really. A BIM manager doesn't really need to do that much. You're doing all these things, but you're not actually. It's not panic mode. So you're just kind of like doing your thing quite calmly and efficiently, and then suddenly there'll be something that gets corrupted or something goes horribly wrong, and you need to turn it around fast. And so then it's good that you're there at the controls.
And what does the daily routine in your life look like? Maybe just before the COVID, because I'm sure you're sitting at home now, right?
Oh, no, I've been going into, basically, if you have to remember that Hong Kong was kind of ahead of the curve because we're connected obviously to the rest of mainland China. And we had people coming here from Wuhan very early on. So we had an outbreak very, very soon after it first emerged.
Right.
So Chinese New Year was at the end of January, and we've basically been dealing with this since then. And we're now in June. So to begin with, I spent time working at home, yeah, sure. But I've basically been needed on site, and the site operations haven't stopped. And my site office has still been running. But basically the way it works now is my kids, they're better now, but they usually sort of wake me up, jumping on my head at like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. And then you mess about with them and get yourself ready for work, and then you're out the door. I'm in the office for about 8:30, 8:15, something like that maybe. So then on site at the moment, you have to wear a face mask all the time. You're always washing your hands. They're pretty strict on all that sort of thing. They're very worried about anyone catching anything.
Right.
And then depending on what goes on during the day, if I go with my wife, you see, so my wife and I drive together, drive part way from my village, park up. She goes to her office, I go to mine. We keep in touch she lets me know when she's leaving. We try to coordinate so we get back together and then drive home together. So we'll get back home for, say, 7:30 maybe.
All right.
And then put the kids to bed. And then if I've got any work to do, I carry on, or we get to sit and watch Netflix.
Okay. Awesome.
That's about it. And I usually play some games. Flying planes at the moment has been my thing. I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know why. It's just a thing. I just get into certain things. So I've been flying World War II planes.
Oh wow, nice. So you're flying your kids' toys and all that.
Oh no, this is the thing. This is what's embarrassing. This is like grown-up toys. This is like I actually bought a joystick for the computer. So
okay. All right.
And my kids are trying to play with it, and it's like, actually, no, that's not for you.
Yeah.
I'll teach them one day. I'll let them play these games when they're a bit older, but they're a bit young.
All right. All right, Simon. And what advice would you give to maybe young architects or someone getting into the BIM space?
I would say, to begin with, at least, don't worry about making mistakes. Never be fearful of making mistakes, because essentially you can't make mistakes. When you're at the beginning of your career, when you're young, you shouldn't be able to do anything which is serious enough to really mess anything up. So that is the time when you have to learn. So don't worry about getting anything wrong, and just keep learning, and be prepared to be flexible, turn your hand to anything. If you see an opportunity, take it. Don't worry about it. Because the thing is, the thing about BIM is no one really knows that much, in all honesty. I get put forward as some sort of expert, but I don't really know that much. I bounced my way through my career to where I am right now, but I didn't really have a plan. I never started off at university going, I want to be a BIM manager. I never considered it ever in my entire life. I just kind of ended up where I am, and this is what I'm doing. But I'm quite far from being an architectural technologist. I never really talked about that much, actually. If I were to give anyone advice in terms of the kind of the direction to go in terms of qualifications or letters after your name, I would definitely say look at CIAT, ciat.org.uk, and consider it's quite big in India, actually. They're growing.
So it's not just for the UK citizens, for anyone.
No, it's international. It's international, but it's just that it's mainly UK because that's where it all began, and it's aligned with RIBA and stuff. But I'm the chairman of the Hong Kong Centre. There's the CIAT Hong Kong Centre, and I'm the chairman. It doesn't mean a whole heap because there's not very many people here that are members, but that's not the point. We're always here to reach out and help and talk to people. So recently there've been a couple of people who have go on to do their chartership. So I'm chartered. Nice. I'm a Chartered Architectural Technologist. So it means it's a protected title. It's just not. It's similar, but not the same as being an architect. It's more of a technical architect.
Yeah.
You're more into technical detailing and managing projects, and it's complementary to architects. It's not necessarily.
Which is also pretty awesome.
Yeah. So for me, I would say that's a good way to go. If you're not sure about being an engineer or an architect, there are other routes.
Yeah.
And just to go for it, basically. And if an idiot like me can get to where I am now, basically by just guesswork and just making it up as I went along. I had no real plan, honestly. I had no real plan. I've just met people along the way who've been some more helpful than others, but you learn as you go along. And this is the thing. It's a great time to be involved with BIM because I would argue, and this is perhaps something that other people would say differently, but quite often you see people who say they need BIM managers that have like 5-10 years experience or something. And you're going, really? You want someone that was doing BIM 10 years ago? Because that's like irrelevant now, yeah? The best thing is that you want someone that's just got good experience over the last couple of years because things move so fast.
Exactly.
Having a long, I mean, it's obviously it's beneficial to have depth of experience, but basically, if you're doing a job and you need someone to do this job, you need someone that knows about that job for the last 2 years in some depth, but no more, really. Because what's that going to offer you? Are they going to bring something to help that's like, you know, some software from 5 years ago because it's obsolete?
Yeah.
That's how fast technology moves. That's how fast
Absolutely.
you know, hardware moves on. And so the things that I was doing when I first started, I get depressed when I'm doing anything which is even remotely similar to what I was doing when I first started, because I'm thinking, this is wrong. You
Yeah.
shouldn't be doing it like this anymore. It should be changing. You should be moving on. So you know,
Spot
it
on.
should be a really good time for young people and graduates. I mean, we're always looking. We're always keen to. In fact, whilst I'm on, before I go, I'm going to say I joined something. I was asked by Rebecca DeChico, this lady that runs this thing called Women in BIM. Obviously, I'm not a woman, but I offered to be a mentor because there's no mentors in this region of Asia. So I said I would like to help in some capacity, if I can just help point people in the right direction, or just be someone like an outreach, just someone to just talk to or something.
All right.
So I'm doing that as well. So I'm always keen to help people that are sort of, you know, up and coming young grads and stuff. It's important. We need more people in the industry, and more women is fine. That's always a good thing. There's not enough women in construction, generally speaking. They tend to disappear, so they tend to have kids and not come back, that kind of thing, which is a shame. That's not what should happen.
Yeah, everything's changing now. I mean, there was a flattening curve back then. I think I read one of your Ziggurat articles where you compared the non-farm industries to construction, and construction always been flat for quite some time.
Oh,
right?
that's not me that did that. But yeah, thank you. That's very well known, that one. Yeah, the comparison. Yeah, it's basically construction's retarded. It just hasn't advanced.
Yeah.
You know, manufacturing has, and construction is still stuck in the dark ages.
Yeah, but it's changing rapidly now.
I think things are changing rapidly. I still think the construction industry would like to be left alone, if I'm honest with you. But I think the world is changing too fast, and I think that you have to get on board, or you'll just get left behind.
All right. Awesome, Simon. That was a brilliant episode. Thanks a lot for coming to the podcast, and hope to have you in the future.
That's my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I just hope that these are helpful and useful, if I'm honest, because I found them helpful. I found them interesting, which is why I reached out to you in the first place. So.
Yeah, super interesting. And if for our listeners, if you want to reach out to Simon, I would be putting up his LinkedIn profile and other links in our show notes. So if you want to reach out and get in touch, please do. All right. And thanks, Simon. And I'll see you in the future episode as well. Probably talk in depth about
keep in
something
touch.
else.
We'll speak again.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Okay. Thank you very much.